So I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you all for making this time to join this call, whatever the time is, wherever you all are. So thank you, and thank you for the comments and the reports that many of you sent in advance of this meeting. We recognize that it has been very difficult over the last more than a year and a half since we met in Trondheim for us to be able to work together the way that we would really like to be able to do. So as we go through this call, one of the things I'd like to discuss at the end is just your thoughts on future meetings, future virtual meetings in particular, that we could arrange and what may make these effective. So please think about that as we go through this meeting now. I did have some slides, so wait a second. I'll see if I can share my screen. Can I? PowerPoint slideshow. Okay, so today we have an agenda which is an opportunity for us to have several updates on significant activities that are taking place or planned in different regions. And then following from the reports that we've received, we've identified two of the topics that were raised there as ones around which to spend a little bit more time having some presentations and discussion. The first of these is the function of the Barcode of Life data systems, BOLD, and the second will be on needs and tools to help us all with communicating the work of iBOL. Our consortium has continued to grow even through the pandemic, and I'm very pleased to welcome many of these new members and representatives at this meeting today. But we are very excited to have so many countries and so many institutions now joining our activities, and we hope that this meeting will help us all to get a clearer focus together on how we can work together. But I'd particularly like to acknowledge that Armenia, Bulgaria, Ecuador, Georgia, our second member in Germany, Hong Kong, India, Italy, Netherlands, Spain, Switzerland, and a second institution in the United Kingdom are now all members of iBOL. And this is greatly exciting for us to see so much activity and so much enthusiasm in so many countries. And as we go forward through this meeting, we'll discuss some of the feedback that's come through the reports on the challenges and the different situations that many of you are facing. But the first, before we get into those topics, I'd like to hand over to Paul Hébert so that he can give us an update on some of the activities that have been going on at the Center for Biodiversity Genomics in Guelph. So thank you, Paul. I'll stop sharing if I can find the link again. Yep. And then hopefully you can take over.
Yeah, thanks very much, Donald. And let me just add my my gratitude and thanks for everyone joining this meeting. It's really exciting to have 12 new member organizations, and yeah, and thank you for coming at this across the whole day. I guess we're probably covering. So let me try and share my screen. Well, as Donald just noted, it's been a little bit more than 2 years actually since we met in Trondheim. And as we left, we're all looking forward to going to Costa Rica. And in fact, we just would have completed the conference had not a virus got in the way. Instead, we've got a Zoom call. Actually, it may be a poor substitute, but I think we found over the last 18 months, I certainly have, and I suspect you have as well, just the value of this format. And actually, I think it's a really great format for an international program like ours. So I want to see us do more of this, do it regularly. And as you will have seen in the agenda, we're already planning on the idea of at least thrice yearly meetings. And I suspect we'll have more on individual working groups. In any case, I want to spend a few minutes looking back first and then looking ahead on where we are now. So as I think you all know, we launched the consortium in 2010. And it began with a single project, Barcode 500K, this goal to try and barcode 500,000 species within 5 years. And by 2015, we had accomplished that goal. And we began to think a little bit more ambitiously about the long-term goals of our consortium. What could we do over the long term? And the mission we adopted was to think about developing a global biosurveillance system as a long-term mission. And that led to a 35-year research agenda that was focused on addressing these three themes. To set up a program that would register every species, multicellular species, that's our focus, of course. And of course, we won't register every multicellular species, but every one that humans regularly come in contact with aggressive sampling programs, to document their interactions and to also track develop the capacity to track population dynamics at a very large scale. And as we began to think about how we might achieve those goals, we thought that two research programs could be activated. The first, Bioscan, and that this would be followed up by a much longer program, the Planetary Biodiversity Mission. This was 2015 when we laid these basic plans, but we looked at costs at that point in time, and they were staggering. So we spent 3 years looking for protocols, adjusting protocols so that it became an affordable enterprise. And we felt courageous enough in 2019 to launch Bioscan. And it will continue through 2027. And then we'll launch the PBM, the Planetary Biodiversity Mission. Bioscan's approaches and deliverables. We had clear deliverables and clear approaches. We were focused on three main research themes: species discovery, species interaction, species dynamics. And our discovery work was underpinned by the barcode index number system. Our interaction work was underpinned by long read high throughput sequencers. And our work on dynamics was underpinned by metabarcoding approaches and short read sequencers. We set targets for each of these three themes: barcode 10 million specimens, study the symbiomes of 1 million specimens, and examine 100,000 bulk samples from sites around the planet. We knew that we would have to increase our production levels, in some cases from 0 to substantial numbers. The barcode challenge did not appear to be too aggressive. We proposed those 10 million specimens. That goal could be achieved by analyzing between 1 million and 1.5 million specimens per year. In terms of species interactions, we were starting from ground zero. We knew we had to do development work, and we planned to activate in 2021, increasing from about 50,000 to 200,000 specimens per year. And in terms of bulk samples, we felt that we would need to ramp up production fairly quickly from about 2,000 samples per year to 16,000. So we had some goals. And in terms of species discovery, we planned to split it into two approaches. One were these 10,000 specimen skims, and we would go to 500 sites around the planet and analyze 10,000 specimens from each site. So this is individual barcoding. And the second, and that would lead to 5 million specimens being analyzed. And then the second line of work on species discovery was a deeper dive on a few sites on the planet in Europe, in the Arctic, and in Costa Rica, and that we would gather at least 5 million records from those three regions in the interval of Bioscan. Species interaction work, as I mentioned, long read sequencers, And the idea that we would address this through a multi-amplicon approach, so single specimen, and analyze that specimen with a diversity of primer sets to pull out its constellation of associates, and that we would do this on 1 million different organisms over Bioscan's lifespan. And then finally, our work on species dynamics, that we will aim to gather samples, analyze collections, bulk samples from at least half of the world's 867 ecoregions, 2,000 sites, 100,000 samples. If you think about Canada, we have 17 ecoregions. South Africa has 34. If you think about places that we might sample, at least some of the work, the plan was to direct it towards sites that would persist for long periods. National parks, national botanic gardens, these are the kinds of places you could think about applying this same system to your nation, of course. And if we do that work, at the end result, if we have just 1,000 specimens per sample, this will have seen the analysis of 100 million specimens. That's a larger number than virtually every museum, not every museum, not the Smithsonian and a few of the giant museums, but it's a very massive number of specimens to be analyzed. Of course, they'll all be georeferenced. What was it going to cost to do this work? Well, it wasn't going to be free. We estimated the cost for Bioscan at $180 million. Now, specimens and samples, we thought that's an in-kind contribution. We can collect things relatively inexpensively, especially given our broad geographic distribution. But it was clear that we needed direct funding. About $120 million was the estimate. And here you can see the breakdown of those items: administration, infrastructure, students and postdocs, contingency, each $10 million. And then the other 4 categories, the actual work underpinnings, supporting the informatics platforms, our species discovery work, our species interaction work, and our species dynamic work, each about $120 million. When I look at this budget now, and actually even at the time, I felt it was probably liberal. I felt that we could do the work for $100 million in cash plus the in-kind contribution, but we had to raise that $100 million. And I thought I would set a goal for Canada. I thought I would see if I could raise $50 million in Canada. And I began with a very strong expectation that I would fail. And the reason for that was there was no program when we launched Bioscan that could deliver more than $5 million. So it looked like it was going to be a tough battle, stringing together 10 wins on the biggest programs in our country. I thought it would fail. But in late 2019, the Canada Research Coordinating Committee launched a new research program, Transformation. And it was designed to be fairly substantial amounts of money, $24 million, and they were going to make 6 awards. And I thought it was perfect for Bioscan, simply because one of the things that made it very attractive was, 1, the money, but 2, the fact that it allowed expenditures outside Canada. So there was only one problem. A lot of other groups felt that they should get this money. In fact, 487 groups submitted an EOI in January 2020. Only 347 actually got round to submitting the LOI, which was about a 60-page document. And then those were screened, and 31 of the LOIs made it through that first screening to become finalists and submit a full application, which was about 80 pages. And then the final shortlist was announced in July. 12 projects were shortlisted, and the decision came down in August 18th, actually. So where do we stand in terms of funding in Canada? In the first year, and these fiscal years we're running on is the start date for Bioscan, so it's July 1 to June 30th, so bridging 2 fiscal years. In the first year, I managed to raise $8 million, but all of this money had to be focused on Canada, which isn't necessarily bad, because it helped meant that BOLD was alive, and it helped meant that the CBG would be available to keep doing sequencing. In the second year, I only managed to add 4.4 million. But one of the good things was 2.6 million of that was actually to support work outside Canada. And that pleased me a lot, specifically work in Costa Rica. The next year, I managed to acquire more funding for Canada, but I only managed to add $120,000 for international work. And at this point in time, I was feeling there was no possibility of securing the target if we didn't win the Transformation Award. Well, as you know, happily we won it. The iBOL won that award, and so we're now sitting at $39 million. And what I'm particularly happy about is that includes $5 million to support work in mid-income nations. I'm now chasing 2 more awards, a CFI, and trying to get a renewal from a foundation in the United States. And if we manage to get those 2 awards, then I think the $50 million target will be achieved. Just want to show you this video.
The Bioscan project brings together an extremely dynamic group of researchers from around the globe that are united with a shared purpose of understanding biodiversity and using this information to guide positive conservation interventions.
I'm so thrilled to be part of the Bioscan project because this work is really going to address and combat the global biodiversity crisis.
Our goal in NORBOL has been to develop a barcode reference library of all Norwegian species.
We see an amazing potential in large-scale insect monitoring.
Using DNA barcoding and next-generation sequencing would help me to understand natural resources in Thailand.
Thanks to this collaboration, we were able to build the reference DNA barcoding libraries of different taxa.
A large part of the research we do uses genomic tools to better study biodiversity.
I think this project is an interesting opportunity to bring together multiple knowledge systems into interaction and connection, allowing Inuit knowledge and science to inform each other.
One is making sure that we're sampling lakes that are culturally significant, that we're not sampling lakes that are wahitapa or sacred.
Now, our DNA Barcoding Center has been a hub for training of young South Africans.
Soil biodiversity is an important element of our ability to grow food, and we have spent too little time understanding life under our feet.
The Bioscan project and the international community around it are essential for the production of new tools, knowledge, and sharing of information that will help us in describing and protecting the Amazon rainforest.
One barrier to doing more extensive work in natural capital accounting is the complexity of nature and our relationship to it. The richer evidence base we have to work with, better advice we can give to business and policy actions in practice.
So that, I'm pretty sure, is the reason why we won one of the Transformation Awards. It's the power of our consortium and the capacity to bring people together around the world to work on a single project. I'm pretty sure that was a distinguishing feature, and I think it bodes extremely well for the future. So we've managed to secure quite a lot of money within Canada to help support Bioscan. I just wanted to give you a sense of what that money is going to be used for. We're going to reinforce our project management staff. We're going to be able to sustain our communications and media staff. We're going to extend BOLD and MBRAVE's capabilities. In particular, we're going to do an architecture revision that will prepare them to accommodate 100 million records, and we'll be expanding the diversity of perspectives by bringing together an artificial intelligence and machine learning team. There's also some funds for sequencing work in Canada, $1 million for species discovery, $1.5 million for species interaction, $1 million for species dynamics. That'll allow about 10% of the Bioscan goals. And then finally, societal impact in the longer term. If we're going to keep getting money, we have to make sure that our science moves into a policy. And one way to help encourage this is through developing a natural capital accounting framework. And so we'll be working on that. There's also the funding that's being raised is being used to advance Bioscan's mission in other countries. The $2 million raised in 2020 is enabling the analysis of 2 million specimens in the ACG and at sites across Costa Rica. It's not quite, the work isn't quite finished yet, but it will be finished by the end of this year. 125,000 that was raised in 2021 enabled barcode skims at these 11 sites. And Nazir, I think you might be happy to see that Pakistan received some attention, and Manuel, Mexico, and Pablo in Argentina, and Magda in Lebanon. The good news about transformation is it's going to provide us with a $5 million analytical credit for mid-income nations. 20 nations that are involved in Bioscan currently would be eligible for that. The idea that this would work through a credit system, each year, 8 of these credits will be assigned and to a particular nation. And that credit would be used to analyze 100,000 specimens at the CBG and to barcode 250 bulk samples. And over the course of the 5 years that this funding would run, this would allow us to cover 40% of Bioscan's barcode total and 10% of its meta barcode total. So we'll have to think a little bit more about implementation and where to make collections, but at least we now have money to analyze specimens from sites around the world. Not everything is rosy. This is a trajectory. The line trajectory is quite smooth and shows things moving smoothly up to 2.2 million specimens since we launched iBOL. And that's pretty much was the target for barcoding. But if you take a look at the blue lines in there, the production per month, you can see all of this oscillation. We have been fighting a series of shutdowns that have almost closed our facility on a few occasions. We managed to stay active, but it certainly impacted barcode production. I'm sure we would have been at 3 million were it not for these hits through lockdown. But I think when you actually take a look at the Bioscan deliverables, we're on target, maybe even a little bit ahead of target on barcoding. But where we've taken a real hit is on species interactions and species dynamics. We have not been able to devote enough effort to develop the interaction protocols. And we could do the species dynamic work, but we focused on the discovery theme because we just didn't have the manpower on campus. So this would be a worrying sign, I think, were it not for the wonderful things that are happening in Europe. There's been tremendous investments that give us real cause for hope, I think. Naturalis will develop a core facility. The Project Life Plan at Helsinki will help our species discover our dynamic work. And then the work in the United Kingdom, in Germany, and at Oulu is going to do a lot to advance species discovery. And the NTU award is still under review, but I have hopes that it will see support. And Dimitris is going to talk to us about a very exciting European opportunity that's just emerging after I finish. If we look at life from a biomass perspective, I think this figure is pretty important. We're the people that are trying to develop a biosurveillance system for the planet. We've been pretty focused on animals. Plants are the major biomass compartment of multicellular life, followed by fungi and animals. And if you're talking about animals, most of the animal biomass is in the oceans. Arthropods are a big segment of terrestrial animal biodiversity, but we need to do better by fungi, plants, and marine life. I'm extremely happy that an NGO in the UK aims to launch a major biodiversity program, and it's Necton is the organization, Nautilus is the project, and their conclusion is biodiscovery will be DNA-based. We've accomplished quite a lot over the lifespan of iBOL. I am confident we're going to raise the money. I'm confident we're going to achieve our goals. So we need to start thinking now about 2028 and the planetary biodiversity mission. it's going to require $1 billion. The one thing that is certain is current grant funding programs cannot fund this. We are going to have to develop access to line items in federal budgets in nations around the world. We have 7 years to do that. I believe that since we're now competing successfully for the largest grant programs in our home nations, that we have this potential to secure this money and transform biodiversity science from where it's always been a Cinderella science into one of the really major scientific enterprises on our planet. So that is our challenge. Use Bioscan's life and the funding we've acquired to lay the foundation for something doing really spectacular and acquiring the funds to carry out the PBM. Thanks very much, Donald. Oh, yep. I'll send the slide back to you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. We have just a few minutes if we're going to keep to schedule. If anybody has any immediate questions they would like to ask Paul. I'm looking at the gallery view. If anybody's raising their hand in Zoom, I'll try and watch for that as well. Guillaume.
Yes, hi Paul, thank you. And again, congratulations on the grant. This is fantastic. My question is regarding the 5 million that is available for middle income countries. In the document, Brazil is included, but in your presentation, it was not. I wonder if it was just an overlook or if
it was an overlook. It was an overlook. My apologies. It's a long string, right?
Yes, no problem. Thank you.
5 million won't go that far, but it will go somewhere, right? It's going to help us. It's going to help us.
Good. Jonas.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Amazing to see the planned investments for Bioscan. I saw the topic project managers. Does that include taxonomically trained data curators as well?
Well, yeah, well, Jonas, I would like nothing more, but I can tell you what I am faced with is the people that give us money want to see project managers, and they don't view taxonomists as project managers. But what I am trying to do, that grant that I'm currently fighting for with our major science infrastructure program, it will have a heavy taxonomic component. We need to have more people looking very critically at these records. But I really hope what's happening in Europe is also going to make this possible. I mean, to bring more eyes onto these records. And we're starting to develop in Canada now a reference library where you can't keep all of BOLD clean, but because it's a workbench. But what you can keep clean is if we can pick a very small number of records, sequence centroid for each species, that can develop the ID library that we need to drive the metabarcoding studies of the future. So I think we see a path. It's more eyes and bringing all of our taxonomic colleagues as partners into this. And I think there's more warmth with the idea of coupling morphology and molecules, I think, than there was a decade ago. Would you agree?
Definitely. And I see your point. I was just curious. That would be the ideal, but I see what you mean.
I'll tell you, the hardest thing has been trying to get money that can move outside Canada. And I hope this, I mean, this is 25% of the real budget of this project. And I just hope it can serve as a role model for other rich regions like Europe and United States.
Thank you. We all certainly hope that. I'd like, as Paul suggested, to follow up now by handing over to Dimitris Kourias from Naturalis in the Netherlands to speak about Bioscan Europe. Thanks, Dimitris.
Thanks, Donald. Let me try to share my screen. I hope that works. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the. I'm very excited for being now a member of the Science Committee, and I hope that I can contribute from my point of view into what I feel is extremely important in building capacity at the European scale for Bioscan. So before I start through the slides, I would like to say that Bioscan Europe, and that's obviously the topic of the presentation, is driven by the realization that if we want to reach these joint aspirations that very nicely Paul described, it's essential that we mobilize resources and we build capacity at different levels, not only the institutional and the national, but also at the continental level. And I think in Europe, we have so many opportunities now to plug into the policy framework for biodiversity that it would just make sense to think at the continental level approach on how Bioscan can develop and feed into the global aspirations. And I would like to say that on this slide, there is a group of people that you see in the slide that I would like to acknowledge their huge contribution in setting up this European initiative and facilitating the process. So as Paul said, basically within the European landscape, we have a diversity of different activities that contribute to the Bioscan program, either directly plugged into Bioscan as national level programs or as programs that contribute to Bioscan from the point of view of content. And I think this huge success that we have at national level also is the cause for thinking and reflecting how we can benefit the most out of the consolidation or organization, if you wish, of all of those activities, so that we can deliver something more than the sum of the parts at the continental level. So I think the Bioscan Europe is fueled by this success, this exciting success that we have already at national and institutional level. And I think it's driven by the need for consolidation, it's driven by the need of looking into the opportunities that the economies of scale and the economies of scope can actually deliver for Bioscan through the European point of view. So this initiative, Bioscan Europe, is basically there to create this shared European perspective and framework for the effective DNA-based biodiversity monitoring. You can see more information about Bioscan Europe in the website that you see on the screen. What are the key objectives for the Bioscan Europe? First of all, as I said, establish a strong European network. Build the connections between people, build the connections between infrastructure, build the connections between policies that actually is necessary across the European countries. Leverage our participation in pan-European and national research data infrastructures. Understand how we can benefit from and contribute to the wider landscape of infrastructures, scientific infrastructures that run either at the European scale or at the global scale. Develop the right protocols and workflows together, pool resources, be able to contribute from the experience, the vast experience that we have at national or institutional level, and build that kind of corpus of knowledge at the European level. Work towards delivering comprehensive DNA barcode reference libraries, of course, so this is more content delivery. That's very much linked to the global perspective. And of course, establish a sample supply, which is also a delivery mechanism, and how we can benefit from the different existing systems of field work and collections-based work that contribute into the material, the sourcing of the material required for achieving the numbers that Paul was mentioning before. So how do we want to approach this mission? So first of all, we would like to leverage what is existing within the national level, the national level investments and the expertise that we have in these countries. Connect and build that kind of capacity and deliver against our European science policy needs and aspirations. Specifically, I would like to say that within Europe today, we have a fantastic opportunity to link to the new European biodiversity strategy, link to the mission-driven science funding framework that Europe is developing, and also plug into the vast amount of new infrastructures and infrastructure capability. So I think especially the last is essential on how we would like to see Bioscan Europe linking into, plugging into, or benefiting from work that is happening already within the landscape of infrastructures. So we set up this initiative, and I think over the last few months, it's been amazing how people have been signing up and to the mission and the vision of Bioscan, and specifically through Bioscan Europe. So within the matter of a few weeks, we managed to get more than 90 organizational partners at the European scale committed to this kind of objectives that I just mentioned. And I think we managed to get more than 200 individual members now that also sign up to this activity. Together, they represent 29 countries. I have to say that even non-European countries are signing up with the Bioscan Europe for now, which is quite amazing. This shows really the need for connectivity and joining forces. And of course, the target of and the mission of Bioscan Europe is not Europe itself, but is fueled and driven by the capabilities of Europe. So making the best of our existing national investments, connect and add value, I think is the motto of what we want to do. Plan the activities as value exchange mechanisms through workshops, exchange of personnel, building knowledge bases, perform a landscape analysis to understand the opportunities for specialization strategies. This is linked to what I was saying before, the economies of scope, and understand the extent and the scope of strengths of each one of our national investments in this DNA-based biomonitoring. So how can we understand the role of each one of our investments in the bigger picture? I think this is essential for how we want to see this continental level approach of Bioscan. And finally, support targeted regional collaboration, especially in areas of the continent where this kind of capacity is still lagging behind. So this is a very high-level view on how, from the existing national initiative, major projects and consortia that represent Bioscan Europe, we want to contribute into the wider program of Bioscan through building capacity, shared resources, and joint research. And the way we want to do this is through mobilizing and exploiting opportunities of funding that already exist within the European landscape. The Horizon Europe, especially Cluster 6, and the Pillar 1 opportunities there, opportunities for networking through funding frameworks like the costs, or even pulling together our joint effort, our joint resources in kind to see how we can achieve more. So all of those are part of the toolkit that we would like to mobilize in order to achieve what is at the top of the slide. One of the greatest opportunities that come up is the fact that we see now in Europe a new program arising that basically is geared towards effective DNA-based biomonitoring and understanding of biodiversity. And I think one of the first opportunities we're trying to explore is and exploit, is within that European framework of funding opportunities. So what we are putting together a proposal. The name of the proposal is Biodiversity Genomics Europe. It basically does what it says on the tin. It's trying to bring together two very big communities in Europe, the iBOL community, the community of barcoding, but also the community of the full genome people, and try to see what are the joint opportunities for achieving our common targets. So in this project that we're now building and has a deadline of submission by the 6th of October, we're trying to see two different streams of work. The barcoding stream, the full genome stream, but also the opportunities arising at the overlap of those two. So basically how we can benefit from the joint work or how we can contribute to joint resources in this project. And we're doing this across different thematic areas. The first one is what we call node development. So building this kind of capacity at a European scale is things that I explained before in the slide, but also looking into a pipeline, a value chain of delivery mechanisms that deliver content from the field to the lab to the biodiversity applications. So if I would summarize what we're trying to do, at least from the Bioscan point of view in this project, is basically in this slide. In the node development, you will see more work around networking, engagement, basically setting up iBOL Europe Secretariat, and potentially an entity within Europe that can immediately tap into financial resources, understand and help national nodes of iBOL develop further. And then on the delivery, capacity and delivery point of view, we would like to see how we can use this project to build capacity around innovation, through R&D, and areas like data management in best practices, European coordination and consolidation of efforts, but also in the delivery point of view, how we can use all of these joint activities to deliver content towards building reference libraries, or of course, biomonitoring, interpretation, and application. So these are all very specific activities that are written now within this project proposal. The project will be a 20 million euro project running for 3.5 years. And actually what is more interesting is this is just the first step of a huge opportunities, set of opportunities that are lying up by the European Commission. And in that respect, we would like to be as inclusive as possible, not only in this project, but understand how we can benefit from these opportunities across the this portfolio of different topics, different calls that the Commission is putting forward in the next 7 years. This is an amazing opportunity. This is an amazing landscape opening up, and I think we are in the right path to making the best out of it. And I'll stop here because I'm already, I think, over time.
Thank you very much indeed, Dimitris. Does anybody have any questions they would like to raise in connection with these European activities? It's a very complicated set of components and links and collaborations that are being proposed here.
Donald, I'd just like to say one thing just to Dimitris and his colleagues that have led this effort. It has been done with supreme diplomacy. I mean, these things turn into simple slides, but creating that linkage between ERGA and the Bioscan EU enterprise was no easy task. It was headbutting at the beginning. And I think it's fantastic, Dimitris, what you have done. And I am absolutely sure that it's going to be a great success. So congratulations on the wonderful, you and your colleagues, of course, Pete and Mara and Edwin have just done a fantastic job on this. And of course, you've been supported by many other colleagues who have agreed to take on working groups. And I think this is going to be fantastic. This is something we've been waiting for a decade for, I think.
Thank you, Paul. And I think most of the people, many people who are on this call now, are in the middle of the of the chaos in developing this proposal, and I think they can attest also to the complexity of it. But I think we're in the right path, in the right state, and I'm sure we will be very successful with it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. In the invitation we sent out for the meeting, we made the request that if anybody wished to provide a quick update on any other activities other than those that we've just been reported on, that they should have a chance to do so. And Guillaume has proposed just to make a few comments on work in the Amazon. Are you able to share your slides, Guillaume?
Yes, I am. Just give me a second. Okay. There we go. Okay, so I will very briefly tell you what we've been planning for the next couple of years in the Amazon, projects that are already funded. So I took the approach of doing this by looking at the map. So most of the activities will be around the state of Pará. To give an idea of the size, this is the size of Angola. And the region that we're mostly doing our work is about the size of Switzerland, which is right over here. So in this region where iron mining happens, and that's why we have the funds to do this work, we have mapped extensively barcodes for plants in altitude fields. And to give you an impression of ferruginous altitude fields, it's the same of number of species that are present in the UK. So, and these are none of them have been barcoded. And this is the only flora of the Amazon and the only one with the reference barcode, which is the first part is being published right now. We also now are moving to forests, caves. There are thousands of caves in the region. So we're doing cave invertebrates, bats, and lots of eDNA and iDNA on the bats. And also mapping the status of land reclamation as a way of objectively giving some indication of how the process is going. So we're studying cave invertebrates, bats, in the region fish as well, snakes and frogs, I find the endemic ones. And we have collected over 400 species of bees in the region. Also, we have started with Vale Foundation to work on agroforestry, and we are using Malaise traps to see how these degraded environments, once they are replanted and reforested for agroforestry purposes, they are attracting biodiversity. In this region here, supported by Hydro, we are doing, my colleagues at UFPA are doing land reclamation work using environmental DNA, and also mapping fish in the Tocantins River in the Amazon basin. Also, the same group is doing fish in the Blue Amazon around this region here, and also doing references, DNA metabarcoding, and also gut content on this fish. And we have started working in the region of San Luis, where there's a large port, and the main drive here was to identify invasive species, but since we're already collected hundreds of samples, we're doing phytoplankton, fish, so we're creating reference DNAs, eDNA, and also bulk samples for phytoplankton. So the questions here are around the impact of mining, identifying invasive species, and comparing the impact with natural areas and port areas. In addition to that, we're doing metagenomics. So this work I described here is mostly done by us at the Vale Institute of Technology, my colleague at the Federal University of Pará, and some of the fish work by Claudio Oliveira, who's a long collaborator of this effort. And we also received funding recently with a collaboration with Hugo to do some of the eDNA work. So a lot of this work is supported by the mining sector, both from a Brazilian company and a Norwegian company that operate in the area. And also we received some public funds from the state of São Paulo and the Norwegian Research Council. So that's the brief overview of what's going on in the Amazon in the next couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And the mining company representatives behind this, are they interested in these activities? Do they see it as important?
Yes, I can tell you from Vale's perspective, actually we are using this, we are using DNA barcode on a routine basis to identify plants. We are using it to tease out some very difficult species to describe. And this is the basic, the point of entry. Specifically, we're talking about some water beetles that are extremely difficult to identify. And also using eDNA to see in which caves we can identify them by sampling water, because these are very limiting to mining licensing for the licensing work. And also they're very much interested in using eDNA to get more objectively view on environmental monitoring. And that's the reason that I'm really concerned with moving the technology now not only to do the research, but also to use it as a standard approach to environmental monitoring.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Additionally, while we were listening there, Scott Miller's just provided a short note in the chat, just emphasizing that the Smithsonian was trying to secure funding from the National Science Foundation to build the US National DNA Barcode Library. That proposal was unsuccessful, but it was seen as a key step forward in trying to develop such models for the US. Before we move on, were there any others who just wished to flag any significant projects or anything else that they thought would be of interest to other colleagues here? We have a couple of minutes at this point before we move on.
Donald, could I just ask
yeah, please do.
Guillermo a question?
Yes, please do.
Guillermo, I mean, I think it's just, you know, you're providing a fantastic model that could really amplify our capacity to track biodiversity. The natural resource harvesting companies around the world spend phenomenal amounts of money on environmental assessment. All of it ends up in gray literature or worse. I think there's a strong motivation for these firms to, economic reasons, that the work is expensive, but also just license to operate. And so you have a couple, Vale and your hydro partner are involved. But I mean, how do we, and we've been talking to a few of the big mining firms in Canada and are expecting to do some work in the Dominican Republic with one of the large gold firms, and have done work in the past with mining firms. But how do we get this to the people that make decisions, that this is the new way to look at the environment, and that, there's an obligation to move your data into the white literature? And have you talked about that, discussed this?
Yes, the one thing that they realized was that we can do a much better work in identifying species. Once we demonstrated how bad the situation was, it became clear to them that they needed to move ahead. And also with the understanding that although they got the licenses at one point, if a new discovery comes up, they have to backtrack and deal with that. So it's best that you have full control of the environment before you move ahead, instead of waiting for the problems to pop up once you already have billions of dollars invested in a plan. That's what convinced Vale to move ahead with this work. And we have full support from the licensing and environmental and sustainability areas in the company.
Very good. Now we just need to convert that into all of the mining companies around the world.
Yeah. I know that.
Donald, I think in Australia, the mining companies in the West are doing Stygian fauna studies using DNA, are they not? Is there?
There certainly has been quite a bit of that, and I think it's noticeable in Western Australia that there's new obligations from the government there for mining companies in particular to deposit their data in a state, and ultimately this is going to be a national data repository. So the obligations to be more public about the species and what the evidence is for different species are going to become much more stringent on some of the companies. And I think DNA-based solutions are going to assist them a great deal in that.
Are you going to tell us for a minute on the $800 million idea in Australia? Taxonomy Australia?
Oh, okay. Well,
I suspect most people aren't aware of that. I mean, I'm excited by it.
800 million. Sorry, you're probably aware of some parts that I'm not aware of. Then.
Well, no, the thing that came out of the Deloitte's review of the economics of
right. So yes, I mean the Taxonomy Australia is an active group chaired by or led by Kevin Teeley, who Western Australian botanist, and working for the Australian Academy of Sciences. And they did engage Deloitte to carry out an economic review of the value of biodiversity to the country in multiple ways. And as Paul indicates, the value of understanding biodiversity that is associated with that was accordingly enormous. I think the current government is not particularly strongly interested in such messages, but it is a useful foundation that I hope will stand us in good stead for the future. Dan, I see you have your hand up, and then Jonas again.
Thank you, Don. Just to mention that our single biggest outside chunk of money for barcoding in Costa Rica has come from an industrial project in the rainforest. And when it was proposed to us as a geothermal project, which is not petroleum, but a geothermal project, we took the bit in our mouth and said, would you let us treat that as though it was a giant scientific experiment instead of an industrial project? which means that we would biomonitor the impact of your roads and your platforms directly while they were going on, and show that they in fact were affecting only the several hectares of your particular geothermal site. And the lower management people, not the upper management people, saw the reasoning of that and said, yes, but don't tell anybody. So they went ahead and did this. The Japanese government paid the bill because they didn't want a black eye for a project that they had financed themselves with $800 million. So what happened was we ended up publishing the results in the white literature with co-authors, engineers, politicians, government administrators, government from Japan, and academics, and the actual field people who actually did the work themselves. That collection of 21 co-authors is not the usual one for white literature academic publications, but in fact, it worked very, very well from their viewpoint, from the geothermal project viewpoint. But the striking thing to us is that the academic community has not taken it seriously. The academic community has not treated it as though it were a big NSF grant. And that's a very striking result of falling between two stools. If you try to satisfy one world, you don't satisfy the other. So that's a complication that comes with involving the community itself, industry itself, and other government agencies of one sort or another as a collaborative effort, rather than simply where you go in and force them to do something one way or another. So that's all, just to mention that it worked very well in Costa Rica, but it required a Costa Rican government that put a sort of a green light blessing on it eventually from above, not in the beginning.
Yeah, thank you. Jonas.
Yeah, unfortunately, I dropped out of the email listserv, so I didn't get the chance to fill in the report in time. And that's why I just very briefly wanted to mention that some of you know that already, but last year we started the Caucasus Barcode of Life project, which didn't fit on the beautiful maps you showed, but it's not far away from the region that you showed. And so we have 2 million euros from the German Ministry of Science, kind of as a follow-up project also to the German Barcode of Life project, including the knowledge transfer component. And we have some of the partners even here today, David Dachnishvili and Ruben Aretunyan is one of them as well. And yeah, so it's some countries, some institutes in Georgia, in Armenia, and in Germany working together to barcode southwestern, mostly Caucasian biodiversity.
Yeah, thank you. It is a great pleasure to see this important region getting some attention and some opportunities in this space to advance the recording of its biodiversity through DNA. And I'm very pleased to have David and Ruben here tonight, or today for you. I've got a couple of slides I'd just like to show at this point. They're very dull slides. There's no pictures on these, but I wanted to just go over a few of the most significant points that arose in the reports that were received. And I apologize to those who didn't get the template in advance and therefore have not yet had the opportunity to submit a report. The idea here was that these should primarily be a way that we can all communicate with one another about the interests, the activities, and the challenges that our iBOL members are facing in each region as a tool to help us all perhaps share ideas, learn from one another, and even collaborate in new ways. There were several issues that were identified through these reports as particularly critical. I think as we would expect, the need for more funding in many countries was a very obvious issue. That the the pandemic has added to some of the challenges and some of the accessibility of funds for biodiversity research related activities in many countries. And that this has also had further effects in the difficulty in getting equipment associated with sequencing activities. I think the most significant comment that I was seeing in the reports from a number of countries was that although there is growing recognition of the opportunities around applied use of metabarcoding and metagenomics as monitoring tools, it's still often very difficult indeed to get the funding required to build the barcode reference libraries. And this is why the success that Paul was indicating in securing some funds for middle-income countries to assist and hopefully to prime the pump in some of these countries in building barcode reference libraries is so important. And any ideas or thoughts on novel ways for us to try to secure such funds, I think, would be of great interest. It's already been mentioned in some of the earlier comments too, that we have a lot of work still ahead of us, even for the barcode sequencing that's already taken place, to continuously improve the quality of the associated data, to review the identifications and make sure that the interpretation of bins to species is one that is as robust and well supported as possible. The long-term, not only the long-term uptake of barcoding based solutions, but also our ability to provide the knowledge foundations that are needed for metabarcoding really depend on finding mechanisms and engaging with taxonomists and the wider research community to expand the curation of our data. And we're not going to have the opportunity today to discuss this in further detail, but one of the comments that came from several in regard to the debate around the Sharkey et al. Paper on rapid taxonomy of wasps was that this is an opportunity perhaps for iBOL to take something of a leadership position in seeking synthesis across the different perspectives, and that possibly an opinion paper that brought some of these ideas together, removed some of the misconceptions that some may still have about the role of DNA barcodes in taxonomy, might be a valuable thing for us to be considering in the next year or two. We'll touch on some aspects of this in a minute. Sajeevan will be leading a session just to talk about the status of BOLD and to open up some discussion in this space. But we asked you the question of how well BOLD's function was meeting your needs. And it's fair to note that quite a number of members said that it was really providing essential tools and services that they needed. But some areas where there was a focus on changes or additions to the tools were, first of all, country level reporting. A number of you pointed out that there is real value in being able to show a view of the contents of BOLD that relates to the biodiversity of a particular country or region. It's more easily interpreted and useful for many users. Continuing concerns, obviously, about the proportions of data in BOLD that are not yet public, that appear in bin clusters but where the individual specimens and associated sequences may not be available for us all to see and review. Requests for more support for bin equivalents based on markers other than CO1, and several suggestions for specific additions and enhancements to some of the tools, including some items which have been suggested were present in earlier versions of BOLD, but which are not available in exactly the same form today, particularly around discordance and analysis. And improving the accessibility of some of the data through downloads and more frequent bin updates was something that was indicated. And in all of these respects, I think the money that Paul was indicating as a priority for helping BOLD to move up to a scale of 100 million is, again, a really important investment that can be made to help us all. And lastly, and this will follow Sajeev, and we'll have some input from Hannah and the opportunity again to discuss a little bit of this. You pointed out the value of materials that could be used to help to promote iBOL and Bioscan activities at the national level, particularly also finding ways to deliver data of value in forms that make sense and are of use to government agencies. So we'll touch on this in just a short while, but as we move forward through the coming year, I would certainly appreciate, and I'm sure Hannah would too, any specific ideas you may have on materials that could assist you with communications and that might be of wider use to other members. I'm going to stop there and switch over at this point if Sajeevan is ready and able to take the next section. Just swinging back to the question of BOLD functionality. I don't know whether you're going to be able to pick up on any of those specifics I just extracted from the reports, but I'll hand over to you. Did you want to present any slides at all, Sajeevan?
Yeah, that'd be great, Donald.
I'll stop presenting anyway. Thanks.
Oh, here we go. Let's see if this works. Can everyone see that? Works? Okay, perfect. Thank you. In the interest of time, I'll just dive in to talk about BOLD functionality and what we can do on the BOLD front to help advance the Bioscan mission and the work that each of you are doing in your own country. I thought it would be valuable to level set before we got into the discussion, because part of it's because we haven't met for some time and a lot has changed in the last couple of years. So I share 4 KPIs that are very meaningful for me. The first is the growth of data on BOLD, and I've tracked it back to 2009, the original founding of the iBOL not-for-profit consortium. And where we are today, we've just about hit the 10 million record mark, which is important in 2 ways. One is it's a fantastic accomplishment. Certainly when BOLD was created, there wasn't an expectation that it would get up to that point. But second, it triggers a re-architecting of BOLD. So when BOLD was originally created, there was a design decision that every increase in volume of an order of magnitude would involve a reanalysis of the architecture, the user interfaces, the use cases that would be supported, and re-envision how it would better support the research community. And that's what we're going to start doing now that we're moving into the space. And as Paul's pointed out, we now have the funding to look at the next order of magnitude, which is between 10 million and 100 million records. I've also added on here a forecast of where we will be in about 6 years. This is based on contributions just from CBG, CCDB's sequencing capacity alone, which is estimated to about 1.8 million barcodes per year. So based on that, we should essentially double the size of the database or exceed doubling of the database in the next six years. But a couple of really important things happen when you look over here at where we are today and where we will be. The first thing to consider is at this point, 32% of the database is based on SQL or third generation sequencing. Certainly in 6 years, most of it, if not the overwhelming majority, will be based on next generation sequencing data. And so that's something that we'll have to consider in re-architecting the system. And interestingly, at this point, we have nearly 80% of the data being public. And my expectation is that the amount of private data as a percentage of the whole should shrink as just because of the numbers growing larger, should shrink. And the impact of having that private data should be decreased. And perhaps more importantly, we have to start focusing on providing interfaces and visualizations that help process and review the public data, because that's what the world is going to be seeing, and that's what the world is going to be using. So these are all positive things in terms of the status of the database. In terms of the species that we've been accumulating in BOLD, we've got a little over 8 million species in BOLD now, about 87% of which is sourced from animal taxa. But a new challenge has come up where the discovery of new species or the addition of new species to the database has slowed as a measure of the number of records coming in. So for example, in 2011, every 6 new records on average would introduce a new species. We're about double that right now, about 12 new records. It's not a major issue, but the trend is that we have to keep generating more data to flesh out the diversity in the database. But these are the main walkaways. By the end of 2022, we should have SQL data. This is next generation sequencing will become the majority, past the 50% mark. And we should expect to see an ongoing rise in the specimen to bin ratio. And these are all considerations for functionality for BOLD as we move forward. The data breakdown on a national level has not really changed all that much over the last few years. And I think this is part of the challenge with capturing more species diversity in the database. I've split it into two groups. Over here, we've got on the left, we've got scale in millions up to 2 million. And we've got the usual players, Canada, Costa Rica, United States, and a few others there. But most of the countries are in the on this side over here, where we're in the 10,000 scale. We'll have to work very hard to move many of these countries over to the other side. But what's interesting is In terms of species diversity and rare species, of course, that's all found here. We get a lot of replication of bins and species over on this side. So this is undoubtedly tied to our diversity accumulation problem, and we need to start seeking data from a broader range of nations. So that's just a brief overview to set the stage for our discussion about functionality, because the functionality really is based on the disposition of the database. So for the rest of the session, I thought I'd just provide a brief overview of the Ssc report, and I'll touch on those. Donald's already covered a bunch of the points. Break down the areas of work on new functionality development, and then open discussion for priority functionality. I think obviously we're not going to cover a large amount of ground, but if we can focus on priority functionality in this session, I think that'd be great. I just want to let everyone know that that discussion of functionality, I will be recording it. I believe this whole meeting is recorded, but I'll be recording that separately as well, so that I can focus on dialogue and generate a report of recommended or requested functionality. Now, following this meeting and moving forward, I want to send out a survey of BOLD performance. This is capturing information about how BOLD and MBRAVE is meeting the needs of the stakeholder group, the Scientific Steering Committee, and then also do a requirements analysis, which will involve a survey of new functionality that's requested, as well as a few direct interviews where necessary, just to get some clarification on needs that are unmet and forecasted needs moving forward. And using a combination of those, a planned feature list will be put together. And really what we're talking about now is BOLD version 5. And BOLD version 5 will address the needs between the launch of Bioscan and achieving the, and scaling up to potentially 100 million records.
May I ask a question concerning BOLD functionality exactly? Because we are now just starting, to insert the data into BOLD. And it appears to be, maybe I am wrong, that there are some functional points which are very important that the BOLD cannot actually recognize sometimes sequences if they are complementary or reversed. Which function is present in like BLAST, in the BLAST system, and could you please just make us specify what is the advantage of BOLD related to BLAST system?
Well, this is a very specific question. So I'll just address it briefly. So BLAST is a local similarity algorithm, and it considers length as well as similarity in its hit list and ranking of results, whereas BOLD is focused on identification. So BOLD is really, especially for CO1, is customized around CO1. The engine, you're right, does not accommodate for complementary sequences, but part of that is just to save on computational time. Once we get an upgrade in computational infrastructure, because essentially it doubles the computational time, right? You've got to search for both and see which matches come up, and that's.
Well, then you have to play with the data from BOLD to make your data in the same format. That's basically it. Actually, yes, it decreases computational time, as you see, but it increases computational time of a person which submits the sequence.
Sure, of course. Not to belabor the point, but it's the resources on BOLD have to be shared by a large group of people. So there are considerations that have to be met in terms of computational load. But we can get back to this through a survey or direct discussion. In terms of feedback from the Scientific Steering Committee report, the priority issues that were raised, and I've split it into priority and secondary issues. The one thing that came up most frequently, and these are based on frequency of reference, is to provide national data views and dashboards. I'd like to delve into this a little bit more in terms of who the target audience is, the specific visualizations that are required, and the reports and who those reports would go to so that we can best tailor the interfaces and analytics for that. The next most frequent reference was a move to move more of the private data into the public realm or remove it from the ID engine and bins. With that, I think we want to look at the fact that less and less of the data is going to be private. Still, it's going to have an impact. So that's something that we can discuss. There is an identification engine library that consists of just public data. So that is already available, but it is worth investigating how bins deal with private data and potentially setting some policies around limited time for which data can remain private. And after that, there is a request for improvement of taxonomic support, synonyms, alternate taxonomies, etc. I think these are very valuable, and we should discuss that better because it's casting a wide net to prioritize. So we'll have to prioritize what we focus on first, and then finally to improve support for NGS-based barcodes. And these are the 4 priorities that I walked away with. And certainly they're well aligned with what we see happening on the database front and is concordant with information collected through other avenues like direct communication with users of BOLD. The secondary issues that came up, still important, but secondary to those priority issues were improvement in the analysis of bins, the frequency of which bins are going to be generated. We are now investing in new hardware to accelerate the bin analysis. The goal is to bring it back to a frequency of 2 weeks of refreshing bins, but also making the bin analysis more sophisticated, where when it's a known bin, it's immediately assigned to that bin while the full analysis waits on completion of the standard analysis. And then we have support for validated reference libraries. This is going to be absolutely critical, especially as we accelerate the data production rate. The error rate tends to increase as the volume of data being generated goes up. Then there was a request for the accommodation of oversampled bins, and we've seen many frequently encountered bins, especially through the use of high throughput sampling activities like malaise traps. Many bins have become oversampled. So especially in the ID engine, in the bin visualization, we'll be looking at downsampling their representation so that the secondary hits are not overwhelmed by the occurrence of these duplicates or replicates. And then we have the request for improving support for NGS-based barcodes. This is something that we are working on in 2 ways. One is to provide access to the provenance data. You need to be able to see the underlying raw sequences in the absence of trace files, but also looking at the alternate amplicons that were recovered. Some of these are pneumites, some of these are non-target taxa that were really part of the symbiome that are already being recovered. And then lastly, access to large volumes of data. being able to download big blocks of the published data that is on BOLD. These are the recommendations and requests that have come through the Ssc reports. There's a long tail of requests, but I believe that these generalizations cover the broad range of what's been asked for. So we'll start working on these and include these in the plans for the next round of development. Does not seem to advance. There we go. But I think we want to start to structure the discussion and structure the collection of requirements among a few categories, because there are many people at different points of engagement on BOLD in terms of adoption. Some of the requests have come in from nations that have millions of records, and some that are just starting to use it, and there will be different requirements. And I think it's really important to be cognizant of those that are just getting onboarded. And so I've tried to frame it in a way that each one of the requirements can be weighted in each one of these categories. And 5 areas: obviously, data standards have to be at the base of all the work that we do. The required data elements, I'd like to revisit those, the acceptable markers, and the required provenance. So a survey will go out that will include those. In terms of data collection, the submission pathways, just raised just now, the data formats, and the level of and mode of support that's needed as we move forward. In terms of data analysis, the identification tool, just raised as well, is going to be, I suspect, a big area of discussion and needs. The integrated analytical tools, visualization, data filtering, and the performance of the tools that we have. In terms of data curation, bin annotation, flagging, taxonomy, images, these are all things that have come up over the past couple of years. Data dissemination, dashboards like national dashboards, data exports, APIs, and data packages. Data packages have come up sufficiently frequently that we've been working on data packages that can be available to the community, and a new set of packages are going out in the next couple of weeks. Essentially, what we'll be doing is taking all of our public data, everything that has been released, and packaging that up for download as a single file on a weekly basis, maintained for the previous 4 weeks, but then maintain a long-term archive on a quarterly basis with a DOI and citation metadata file to go along with that. So this will support the metagenomic work that people are doing. This will support referencing of a snapshot in time, as well as supporting the analysis of change in the data over time, and a range of meta-analysis that will be possible with that data. We will be going back and retroactively generating those quarterly archives, going back for a period of time. So those will be filled in throughout the rest of the year. So I'd like to frame the rest of this discussion around these 5 categories. And it's really important to note that the symbiome will impact all of these areas, because it will require change in every which way that we're operating. I'd like to add a new area of discussion that we've not really gotten into in previous meetings, and that's around analytical standards. Validation methodologies have been coming up through a couple of different papers, and I think it's worth, as a group, specifying how we validate data and what is going to be acceptable through what kind of ranking, and then the process through which bins get generated, different markers, different algorithms that will be acceptable, and for a range of different taxa if there's interest in that. So how I'd like this discussion to proceed with the limited time that's available. I'm just going to turn on my trusty recorder, is we can start with exactly the categories that we've gone with, and give each one a short amount of time. I'll try and give different people an opportunity to speak. I will look for hands. I'm not a
Sanjeevan, I'm worried about time.
Yeah, I'm not a Zoom user. How much time do we have left?
Well, I think you've already, well, I mean, the collective group has gone 10 minutes over now. I think, am I right, Donald?
No, you're about 1 or 2 minutes over, but I think we probably have a small buffer. So perhaps 4 minutes for a few comments and questions.
Yeah, if anyone wants to raise anything about this process,
because I think this is important.
Yeah, a process of requirements analysis. I would say that's the most important thing, or any really pressing issues that have not been covered yet. Please raise your hand and just speak briefly if you can. I'm not seeing any. Oh, no, I am. Torbjørn?
Since no one were raising their hands, right? Hi, everyone. I think the data curation part is something that we really need to consider and find a way not to make this Sisyphus work, that we go in and we curate the data and we do a binary discordance analysis and start fixing all the wrong identifications or flagging anonymous records, and then 1 month later it's just as bad as it was. So I wonder if you have considered, although it's really tedious, to have some kind of improvement system that in order for a record to be admitted into, let's say, a bin, you either have to show some reasonable biological explanation that it has a different identification than the 99 records already in that bin, to avoid this this continuous addition of errors.
Yeah, Torbjørn, I think you're totally correct. We're needing a framework that really separates those records that have been validated from those that have not been validated. So these have been reviewed by an expert and have sufficient annotation about that review process, because I don't think it's just a matter of saying, tag something and say it's validated, because we need to ensure that it's gone through a specific process. And then we need to layer our bin system so that that new records still get bins, but we have a higher tier of records and bins that have been validated. So there is going to be work on that, and we can discuss what that looks like through alternate consulting.
Torbjørn, can I just briefly respond too? I mean, the one thing that I think a partial solution at least is a subset of records that are really the reference data set, the reference bin library that have been, I mean, BOL's always going to be a workbench. So it's going to be invaded with poorly identified specimens, and we know how difficult it is to resolve those, but have a subset of records that, I mean, if you think about the birds of the world, it's 10,000 or 20,000 or 30,000 records at most with 10,000 species. Those records need to be protected and curated with high vigilance. And if we did that on group after group, I think the problem you're talking about would certainly be greatly reduced.
Okay, I'm not seeing other immediate questions, but as Sanjeevan has indicated, there will be surveys coming out and an opportunity for all of us to help to shape some of the directions that BOLD can accommodate going forward into the future. So out of the rest of the time we have an item with Hannah to discuss some of the communications needs for the members. Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks, Donald. I just put together a brief PowerPoint just to kind of
share with some of the new members, especially some of the things that the communications team has to offer and how we can support you. So I will just share my screen now. Okay. So we are a two-person media team. It's me, obviously, and Suze Bateson, who is our lead designer, and she is, you'll be very familiar with her work if you know Paul's PowerPoint presentations and a lot of the iBOL media materials that, that have been circulated at conferences in the past. We are also, so we have the iBOL.org website where we share a lot of our news from across the iBOL consortium. And as you can see, we've got lots of nice media pickup. And recently there was a nice story about Ivona and one about Marco, and had nice coverage in Manga Bay and The Guardian and lots of other news outlets. So if you do an interview in your local news or in sort of your national news, please do let us know. And we always like to share that on the iBOL site and also share it on social media as well. And also we generate our own news as well on the website. So when we have a new science committee member join, for example, we will often post an article welcoming them and introducing them and sort of what their research focus might be. So you can see that. We've also got some other stories about Magda, for example. She received a National Geographic Society grant to study Lebanon's endemic irises. And so when people sort of, I guess our news would be receiving awards and recognition, any new funding, new projects launching, that kind of thing. So please always send us a note and let us know if you'd like us to promote some of your work. Other opportunities to promote your work, we've got the Barcode Bulletin, which is a great online publication, and you can see the web URL there, and we'll circulate the PowerPoint after so you can have a link to it. But this is a great avenue just to write sort of a conversational article sort of for a broad audience to let them know what you're looking at, what kind of research you're undertaking. And it's also a great opportunity for younger early career researchers to publish some work as well. We also accept sort of photo essays from your field work and other video content and things like that too. And then also iBOL.org, we do have the news page there under news and events. You can see all of the news. We also have social media platforms. We have Twitter at the iBOL Consortium, which has grown considerably since we started the Bioscan launch in 2019. We have a Facebook page, the International Barcode of Life. We have an Instagram page, iBOL Consortium, and a YouTube channel as well, which has some educational videos. It has our Bioscan project video, which is a nice way to kind of share Bioscan's mission very succinctly if you are trying to share it within your country. And then also we have the Barcode Brief, which we've only, I think, had maybe 3 editions go out so far, but it's an internal newsletter for the iBOL Consortium just to share news internally and with other partners. Okay, and also if you visit the iBOL.org website under news and media, we have a number of resources available for you because I did notice in the feedback, one of the things that a lot of the iBOL SC members were asking for is sort of ways to engage stakeholders and sort of documents that they can take to meetings within their own countries. And so on this media resources page, you can see a number of things. We've got a webinar on DNA barcoding. We have a Bioscan brochure that will explain sort of Bioscan's mission. And also we have a number of other materials that we produced on a project just recently that we completed with the CBD. So there are documents on DNA technologies for biodiversity management, a document on data sharing for global benefit, and also a couple of videos as well if you're looking to sort of build capacity within your country as well. There's a step-by-step DNA barcoding video, and then another video that shows how meta-barcoding is an effective tool for biodiversity management. Also, an important item that came up, I think, as well in the feedback was a need for translations. And so we are able to provide translated documents to you. And for example, the Bioscan project video, we have it already translated in French and in Spanish. So the only thing that we would ask of you is just to find a way to do the translations on your end, send us the text, and then we will incorporate it into either the video or brochures, and then we will lay it out in a design and then send that back to you for use in your own country. And then also too, we can do sort of customized Bioscan logos to kind of maintain a consistency of the Bioscan and iBOL brand. And Suze has actually produced this nice collection of logos here. And I know that Bioscan Germany produced a beautiful website for GBOL 3. And they used a lot of our sort of branding and sort of followed the iBOL website that we have produced. So we can also provide the same thing for anyone else who might be interested. And if you'd like to contact us, it's media@ibol.org. And please get in touch with us at any point if there's anything that you need. And then I also just wanted to briefly just touch on some of the feedback from the reports. I think some of the main themes that came out of the reports were sort of a need to engage stakeholders, also a need to kind of mobilize the barcode data, and that is something else that I think would be great. And then also public education. And I think we have a number of tools that can help with that too. I think Jerome, you mentioned public education as kind of a priority for you. And then also Nazir, you mentioned maybe having a series of webinars or seminars to bring together the community. And that is actually something that we are working on as well. We would like to start sort of a very regular webinar or seminar series. So if you have a topic that you would like to present in a webinar or seminar to the community, please do get in touch. We'll start to kind of lay out a bit of a schedule for the year coming up. And the other thing is, I think with this new kind of energy around Bioscan, we would like to put together sort of a communication strategy, and I will be in touch with each of you just to talk a little bit more in depth about what your needs might be, so we can make sure it's effective and good. And I think, oh, and one other thing, I think I've been talking with the Bioscan Europe people about putting together sort of a working group for Bioscan for communicators. So that is something as well. If you have a communicator within your institution that you would like to connect me with, then that would be great. And yeah, so I think those are some of our plans going forward. So I guess I would open it up and stop sharing my screen.
Sure.
Okay. Oops. Great. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any comments or questions on the communications side? Okay.
Donald, I
Thank
guess
you, Hannah.
Just
Yep.
say, and Hannah, thank you for your efforts, and Suze, thank Suze for her efforts. But it's a Herculean task to, to try and do a really outstanding job. I think we're doing a good, even great job on some of the media release, but it sure would be good to have more resources that we could commit to this. It's something we should probably think about as a group. Is what is the appropriate allocation of resources to public outreach? Are we allocating enough?
Did you want me to answer that question, or are you?
Yeah, well, I'm sort of interested. Yeah, of course. So you'd spend more time thinking about it than I do, Hannah.
I do think that is one of the big challenges that we have, is that we are quite just pressed for resources, for sure. I think there's so much that we can do. And I love a lot of the feedback that came back about sort of stakeholder engagement. And I've been sort of trying to rack my brains on just how we can kind of improve our overall communications flow. And we have just so many different iBOL members and so many projects going on that just to kind of do a really good job, I think we will need to develop a very streamlined strategy and sort of figure out you know, what are the things that we need to focus on for the next year or so, just to get started. So I think we've got two challenges. One is sort of getting us out into the broader, sort of raising our profile in the world and engaging stakeholders. And then I think the other side is sort of engaging one another internally with sort of these seminars and more regular meetings and that sort of thing. So yeah, so we definitely have our work cut out for us.
What is the biggest gap? It could be, you know, if we had one more person, what could that person do?
I think it's just, I mean, there's so much, you know, incredible research that's happening all the time. And I think one thing would be to have sort of more regular stories going out about some of the research. I think even Guillermo, I was madly making notes even just through Guillermo's presentation. And I thought that's such an important story that we should be telling too. I mean, just Guillermo has a very interesting perspective working within Vale. In Vale, you know, I think that the work that he's doing, the funding that he's receiving, and some of the outputs, I think that would be an important story to share, because I think that, and even I think Rodolphe was saying too, that, you know, we need to simplify sort of the messaging around our proof of concept and like, how are we going to do this biosurveillance? And I think all of that, I think if we had a little bit more energy in that area and sort of telling those stories, I think that would be good.
Okay. And what, I mean, can members help by, you know, providing videos, providing stories on a more regular basis? Should we all be sort of thinking about trying to give you one story a year so you've got stuff to work from?
I think so. And I think that would be great, definitely. And I think video clips, visual material, that's a big thing too, because everything now is, you know, on the web. So we need a lot of visual content too, because even if it's just sort of, even if it's not a full, you know, scientific paper that we're writing a story about, even if it's just, you know, an interesting research location. So when you were putting together the transformation video, sort of showcasing all of the researchers, the material that came back to me was gold. I mean, for example, even just Nazir had this really interesting, you know, research that he's doing in this juniper forest, and you know, just being able to see some of the places that people are working. I mean, we can even just share that too.
Great. Please, everyone, think about flooding Hannah with content.
I see Dan. Dan's got his hand raised, I believe.
Yeah. Dan?
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. As I listen to all of this today, I have a distinct feeling of very top-down, meaning the ivory tower, the scientists, the researchers are looking down, and I'm not hearing very much about asking, for example, a government, whether it's a German government or a Brazilian government or an Australian government, what they would like to hear from iBOL. Not the stories that we would like to tell, because they're of our own interest and they're our own traditions, but what they want to hear from iBOL. What do they want? And I'm referring here specifically to things like the Ministry of Environment or the Ministry of Health or the Ministry of Education. What would they want to hear from this data information generating factory, such that it comes out the door a product that can be directly thought of as useful by them? And I say this for partly pragmatic reasons. A lot of the funding that we are all expecting is coming from governments. Another lot of it is coming from the ordinary people on the street, literally millions and millions and millions of store owners, parents of grade school children, all those kinds of people. What do they want to hear about iBOL? Because they've all heard about species since they were children. Even if you're somebody who lives in the middle of the Brazilian rainforest, you have some concept of what species are. So the question becomes, what do they want to hear from? And it seems to me that's a kind of communication, the two-way street, obviously, that should figure into our thinking, whether it's your Hannah's stuff or whether it's the technical side of things that Sujivan is worrying about. That's all.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan. Guillaume.
Yes, thank you. Following on what Dan said, I think this is really important. And we've been connecting with IBAMA, which is the Brazilian Environmental Agency. And this week, they requested me to talk to them on a scientific board to discuss the use of DNA barcodes. And also in 2 weeks' time, we will have another meeting where the whole management plan for the national forests in the region is going to be discussed. And they want to hear about DNA barcoding and environmental DNA. So I think this is exactly what Dan was alluding to. And I think it'll contribute to forcing, especially large companies, to use this technology as the regular business. And I'm very positive that, at least from Bali, what will happen is that we'll increase the demand for what we are doing. Luckily, we just upgraded our SQL, so we can produce more data.
Good. Thank you very much. Okay, we've come to the end of the main agenda. The only other topic that I was specifically going to raise was around future meetings or future ways that we can meet and work together. I appreciate so many of you staying on for the nearly 2 hours already in whatever time zone each of you is based. But I'd like to know, either tonight or in the week to come, whether you've found having a meeting like this useful, and any topics that you think could be usefully approached in future meetings of this science committee along this model, or potentially, as I think Paul alluded in his message, whether we should be thinking about some working groups that might be smaller or work in a slightly different way. But if we are unable to have face-to-face meetings, and perhaps in the future more and more with the desire to reduce carbon emissions, we should be finding the best ways we can to work together virtually like this. So have people found it useful to hold a meeting like this? And are there particular things that if we hold further meetings in the months to come, you'd particularly like us to try and dig into? Torbjörn.
I really would like to meet again in person. I think that's a much easier way to do, and I'm sure that you all agree. But any news on this conference for next year then? Is there an update maybe on the website? I have realized that very many different societies and organizations are postponing their conferences to next summer. And I guess there will be a big clash of, 100 conferences during 3 months. So it would be great, I think, if the conference is intended for August 2022 to have some information up there so people can reserve the dates and maybe even start thinking about travel arrangements, because there are not that many flights anymore.
Yeah, Torben, I feel it's really optimistic to conferences. I mean, at least here in Canada, we're living in a lot of uncertainty, and in Australia, there's lockdown. I mean, there's a lot of barriers to travel still. I mean, Dan manages to do it, Dan and Winnie, but there aren't too many people traveling yet. I think these conferences, a big conference with 500 people from all around the world, wow. Risky booking the hotel, hundreds of thousands of dollars invested. It's expensive proposition. Oh, if we could only go back to those halcyon days in Trondheim.
And it was lovely.
I mean, Daniel, I think, has said that in Costa Rica, it would be very difficult to get even the hotels up and operational by then. Is that true, Daniel?
Sorry, I'll say it again.
The hotels, is it possible, you know, can one book a hotel with 500 places for next August, for example?
It would not be wise for Costa Rica. Sorry, it would not be wise for Costa Rica because Costa Rica is now undergoing yet another wave of COVID, and the restrictions within the country are going to get much more severe rather than less severe. And we can't predict when the next one is going to come along either. So even if Costa Rica, who's feeling very strongly the lack of income from tourism, even if they are willing to open their doors and allow the hotels to occur, I can't imagine that around the world there'll be the freedom for people to leave their particular countries and go to a meeting in Costa Rica. We would love it, but I just don't think it would be wise to anticipate it.
There's also the issue that next February will be the presidential election, and it's really, really unclear what direction the country would be going in at that point, how supportive they will be of biodiversity. We have our fingers crossed, but there are a number of unknowns.
Yeah. Costa Rica changes its president every 4 years. And this is coming up now next year. And I would say it's not an opportune time to plan a big meeting in Costa Rica, or frankly, I think any other country in the world, but in Costa Rica.
The Norwegians are very brave.
Yeah, we go everywhere. But what about some new ideas then? You know, they could be, what about satellite meetings? You know, if people meet around in the same time zones or something like that, we could have a more or less of a joint program, but still gather at a few, you know, selected places. Maybe that is something that would be easier. Traveling within Europe is certainly a lot easier than traveling abroad for us at the moment. And perhaps we'll stay like this for a couple of years. Who knows?
Yeah, I think these are really important points, Torben, to look for creative solutions.
Yes. Why don't think about just making a very specific and targeted meetings based on the regional level or some specific activities, just by interest, and it will be much easier to organize a meeting with, I don't know, 10 or 20 participants rather than 500 participants.
Yeah. Thank you, David. Vikas.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, so hello, Paul. It's a long time. I was thinking, can we have a meeting on barcoding of the museum specimens? You know, from the last 2 years due to pandemic, we could not do any field work. So in India, we plan to barcode the museum specimen. And, you know, we have millions of specimens housed in Geological Survey of India. So I have been struggling from last 6 months. We tried the shorter fragments and then to join them, but it failed. So can we have a meeting on the barcoding the museum specimen? What technology should we really have to apply? I was thinking to go for a whole genome sequencing at like 5x coverage, and then try to assemble the mitogenome out of that. Will it work, or do somebody have some more ideas regarding that? Because I was reading a paper last week published in Genome. They have assembled mitogenome from 140-year-old Lepidoptera. So do we have to go in that direction, or do we have something else to offer with this, which is more cost effective something? Because we have some funds to do the barcoding of the museum specimens now. The funds we have for travel now, we are thinking to spend for the barcoding museum specimens.
I think it's a very relevant topic, yeah, and as you say, particularly while it's difficult for us to travel for field work, to be looking at how we can use this opportunity in our collections, and there's probably several significant issues that it would be useful for us to discuss. So I'll certainly take that topic as a suggestion. It may be something that's better for a webinar or set of webinars as well as a workshop, but we'll take that into account. Thank you. Marco.
Like one more thing.
Yeah.
Like in Canada, they are using the BioSQL for sequencing. I feel that the technology should be shared with all the member nations. We can use the same here to reduce the cost of sequencing.
Sorry, I couldn't understand all of that, Vikas. Did others hear it?
I think Vikas may have asked if the SQL protocol would be available to all members of the consortium. And the answer is yes. We're happy to share all details of the methods that we use, and would be delighted to see you use it.
The money we spend here for sequencing is quite big. It's around 6 to 8 USD dollars for each sample. So if we can have the protocol for SQL, then we can try it out here and we can reduce the cost. And we can have more money to sequence more samples.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. We're really at the end of time, but Marco has his hand up.
Yeah, just quickly, that you were asking about the need of having this kind of meetings, and definitely I think that we haven't been having a meeting for a long time. It was very good to learn about the news, and I think it was very important to get informed. But in the future, I'm hoping to have this kind of meetings a bit more often, maybe also so that they would be a bit more specific around some specific topics with more time for discussions, because today we really didn't have much time for discussing about so many different topics to be dealt with, and having more meetings more frequently, more specific. That's what I would be hoping to see.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, I'd particularly like to thank my colleagues in Canada for all of their hard work in making this meeting actually happen, and to all of you for joining. We will certainly take those last few comments particularly on board, and make sure that we have some more events planned in the near future to dig into some of these other topics. Was there anything else you wish to say before we finish, Paul?
Well, I mean, just to pick up on these points that have been raised, and I guess how people would feel about, what we were suggesting, Marco and others, was sort of every 4 months we would convene a meeting like this. Maybe some of them would just be an hour long because we don't have that many things to discuss. But as well, I think what's come out of the discussion today is it would be extremely useful to have targeted discussions on particular topics of interest, and members of the science committee could say, hey, I would like to learn everything there is to know about analyzing museum specimens or the SQL workflow. And then we convene a meeting, and only those people that are interested in that topic join in. But we try and have a collective meeting every 4 months. And I think we feel we haven't done a good job. I mean, we kept hoping this was all going to thaw and disappear, and you keep hoping and hoping, and then you realize all of a sudden you've got to change your practices. On the other hand, we don't want to overwhelm people across all these time zones on crazy frequent meetings. And so the idea was to break it down, these every 4 month meetings. Next one would be in December, in January, then in May, in August or early September of each year. We just cycle through like that. And then on top of that, inject in the special topic meetings. Do people feel that's a reasonable way to proceed? Donald at least likes the idea.
Yeah, same as Dan, yeah.
All right. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, there's lots of time to think about this, but I think what comes out of this is what topics would be useful to people. And if there's something that would be very useful, please send it to Donald. And Donald, thank you so much for what you've done to organize this meeting and keep the group together. We all really appreciate it.
No, you're most welcome. I'm just so grateful to this group being there and doing so much wonderful work.